Mrs. Daniel, you've asked a question about the symbiotic relationships of the animals within the reserve, and there are so many, too many for me to even begin to count, but something I'm specifically looking for to show you is one of the most fascinating examples of a symbiotic relationship, and that's the type of bird that will be sitting on some of these, or should be sitting on some of these giraffes. Just gonna poke my nose in here. Hello, ladies. Miss Daniel, the reason I wanted to raise this, and I don't see any of them sitting on these 3 females at the moment, but very often giraffe are accompanied by birds known as oxpeckers. Now, oxpeckers are birds specially designed for sitting on the backs of giraffe and other large mammal species and picking off the ticks. One oxpecker, and they're tiny little birds, about the size of, I'm trying to think of an American bird example, probably about the size of a magpie, just smaller than a crow. And they can eat about 1,000 ticks in one day, and that's just one bird. And the giraffe and the other mammal species are absolutely covered in the blood-sucking parasites. And just have a look at the female on the left. She is heavily pregnant. I've only just noticed that now, that round belly compared to the other one. There you can see the ticks clustered around underneath her tail. And you can imagine that can weaken an animal like a giraffe, and the oxpeckers come along and they actually help the animals to remove them, because when you don't have fingers, it can be a very tricky thing. The interesting thing about the relationship with oxpeckers is in that case it's an example of a beneficial symbiotic relationship, an example of mutualism where both species benefit. But if the giraffe has a scratch or an injury of some kind, the oxpeckers also feed on blood and mucus, and they will peck away at that wound and that injury and keep it from closing and from healing, and often increase the chances of bacterial infection. So in a way, almost acting as a parasitic animal on the giraffe. And looking at this lovely light-colored giraffe, she's a very attractive female. Mrs. Daniel would also like to know, can you tell the difference between individual giraffe based on their markings? And yes, just like our spotted hyena friend, oh, she's doing a pregnancy waddle there through the bushes. Just like our spotted hyena friend and the leopards on the reserve, each and every giraffe is completely uniquely patterned. Generally speaking, the females are lighter in color than the males, and usually they darken, all giraffe, whether they are males and females, darken with age, but they'll always have a unique spot pattern that is completely the same to them. It's one of the things that helps their calves to bond with them, apart from their sense of smell, as well as the calls between the mother and the calf. Now, giraffe are one of those creatures that don't have a set herd pattern, and they're not territorial in any way. So in answer to Caleb's question, yes, some animals are territorial, and they will move about in their set areas, but some animals are nomadic, as Caleb was asking, and a giraffe is a perfect example. Generally, they have home ranges, which means an area that they are used to moving about in. But we do get a combination of, for example, elephants and giraffe that are hugely nomadic. Some certain individual cheetah will also cover enormous distances and possibly never even return to a place that they used to inhabit. But yes, it just depends on the type of animal species and the way in which its herd is structured. I'm going to go and see what other fascinating creatures I can find. Let's find out what Mr. Hendry's found for you.
Now, just underneath that tree, which is called an apple leaf tree, or Philonopter violacea, which you don't need to remember, are 2 of the Africa's smallest carnivores, and they are called dwarf mongoose. Now, a dwarf mongoose is a little mongoose, obviously the smallest representative of the family that we have here, and they knock about on this clearing eating small invertebrates and eggs, and they might even eat small snakes. Mongoose, of course, are very famous for eating snakes. And they've got quite an interesting relationship with the bird behind them, which is a hornbill, and I was talking to you a little bit earlier about the hornbill. That one is a red-billed hornbill, is it? Brian, I can't even see. No, it's a yellow-billed. It's a young yellow-billed hornbill. Its beak is yellow, therefore it is the yellow-billed hornbill, and it's most famously known, of course, as the Zazu bird. Zazu being from the Lion King, of course, and Izazu is a Zulu word meaning the wise man, which he wasn't in the movie or the play. Now, the bird and those mongoose have an interesting relationship where the bird seems to play a watchman's role, while the mongoose are about the place fossicking about for invertebrates and digging up bits and pieces to eat, so that hornbill will often sit above them and alarm call if something comes along, and likewise the mongoose will alarm call if they see something like perhaps an eagle in the sky which might harm the hornbill, and they seem to warn each other of impending doom, as it were. And that's a very interesting relationship that they have with each other. Now, as you spread her out, if you look around this clearing, you can see that there is no grass on it at all. That greenery you can see is just sort of pioneer vegetation that's only just managing to hang on during the course of what is the worst drought in recorded history of this area. Started keeping rain and temperature records in 1904. It's now, of course, 2016. So in 112 years, there has never been a worse drought than we have now. Now, Jamie's got some striped ponies with her. Let's go across there. I'll carry on and see what else I can find.
Indeed, some striped ponies, or as they are properly termed, plain zebra, to show you, in this case, a little foal hiding in the bushes. Now just have a look as VM zooms out at how cryptically those stripes manage to camouflage them. Now this is one of those fascinating things about the world that I get to inhabit, and one of those things that I hope will spark interest within all of you. Nobody knows why zebra have stripes. I'm sure that many of you have always assumed or have been told that zebra stripes are a form of camouflage. That is true to an extent. They certainly act as disruptive coloring, and that was always the accepted theory for many, many decades. But now evolutionary biologists are starting to wonder why, if stripes are such clever camouflage, why then do other animals not have any? Oh, there's a whole herd coming through there. Well spotted, Liam. Why is it only the zebra that has adopted this approach? And they've put forward a couple of theories, including one that is temperature control, thermoregulation on hot days out here, where the black stripes heat up faster than the white stripes and create a current of air movement, with cooler moving into hotter and vice versa, and cooling the zebra down in that manner. The other option that has been put forward as a theory is that it disrupts the vision of the flies, things like tsetse flies that carry diseases such as sleeping sickness. There we go, thank you, zebra. Very dense vegetation through here. Oh, foal's coming in to have a drink. Looks a little bit too old to still be suckling, right at its weaning phase. But yes, the truth is, no matter how many theories we have, whether it's the stripes disrupting the landing vision of insects, meaning that they don't necessarily target zebra as often, the truth is we just don't know exactly why zebras have evolved to have stripes. Now, zebra, as animals go, and you'll notice they're very alert and constantly looking around them as they move towards water. Kate was wondering, what is the highest animal on the food chain that we have? The answer, the apex predator out here, Kate, is a lion. So as animals go, they out-compete. They compete with the other predators and do so incredibly successfully. Sorry, it was a Chase's question about the apex predator. Chase, lions are the apex. There's close competition for second and third place between spotted hyenas and wild dogs. So the animal that we saw earlier, and then the critically endangered wild dog, and that is just a question of numbers. And then below that, in terms of the predator hierarchy, the foal's having a little scratch there on the left. When you don't have thumbs, trees will serve as a really good place to scratch that itch. Need a jolly good rub. Chase, leopards and cheetah fill the other top 5 spots below that in terms of predator hierarchy, but bear in mind there are lots of different food chains and there are lots of different types of apex predators. So for the birds, something like a martial eagle would be considered to be the top of the food chain in that particular food chain, the largest raptor or bird of prey. I wanted to just give you a little bit of something of a fact and figure in this area, since we are somewhat limited in terms of the time that we have. In the beginning of the 19th century, there were 100 million people in the entire African continent. There are now, as we enter the sort of the second decade of the 21st century, there's over 1 billion of them. And that means that wildlife, pristine wildlife areas like these are of such critical importance. And you happen to be watching one of the largest and one of the best looked after wilderness areas anywhere in the world, where the animals can continue to act as they have for hundreds of thousands of years. But because they are fenced and because they are small, we are constantly learning about the different conservation techniques that we applied. 100 years ago, when the Kruger National Park was started, the conservation practice was to shoot all of the predators. Lions, wild dogs, hyenas, leopards, everything had to go, and that was what they thought was an appropriate conservation technique. Now, 100 years later, we've learned far more, but it's a process that is still ongoing, and I hope that through these drives we'll be able to inspire an interest in conservation and the way in which these animals have evolved. So thank you all for joining us. I'm going to say farewell to you for the morning. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And for the last few moments, I'm going to send you back across to James so that he can say goodbye as well. Cheers.
So these are called helmeted guinea fowl, so named for that little helmet that they have, and they live in a flock. You can see as Brian zooms out that there are a whole lot of them. Look like little fat ticks crawling across the clearing here, and they're eating whatever they can find. They're eating seeds if they can find them. They're eating buds off these sort of little herby kind of invader plants that, well, not invader, but pioneer plants that we have here. And they live in a flock like this for protection largely. They alarm call if they see anything nasty coming to get them. Otherwise, they also are what we call communal breeders, and that means that there will probably be one group here, not one group, one pair within the flock that breeds, and the rest of them will just help to raise the young ones. So some of them will be fully grown adults and some of them will be part of the clutch from this year. They grow very fast, of course. Now, Bella, interesting question about how global warming is affecting this area. Bella, I'm not sure that we're able to tell that yet, but what I can tell you is that it is going to upset the balance of wood to grass. Now, there are 2 types of plants that we get out here broadly. We get woody plants, which are trees, and then we get herbaceous plants, which are grasses and herbs, like the ones these guinea fowl are trying to eat now. And they have a different physiology completely, and the increased carbon levels in the atmosphere will favor the development of woody plants and not the development of herbaceous plants like grasses. Now, what that means, of course, is that over time there will be an inevitable thickening of the bush. So instead of having sort of fairly open savanna grasslands, you'll find that those will eventually close up. We think, this is all, of course, postulation. We're not sure exactly what will happen, but that will inevitably change the suite of herbivores that live in an area, which will in turn affect the suite of carnivores that live in an area. What will happen, but that will inevitably change the suite of herbivores that live in an area, which will in turn affect the suite of carnivores that live in an area. and giraffe and that sort of thing, other browsing animals. So that's the kind of effect that a change in the vegetation will have. Like I say, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, and there are so many variables that we're dealing with out here that we're just scratching the surface of understanding. If you think of how many invertebrate species in the world, there are probably millions of them that nobody's described yet. So when we come into an area, the best thing for us to do is to just observe and see and try and understand, and not try and interfere too much, simply because 99% of the time we have no idea what's actually going on in a wild system. These areas have existed for thousands, hundreds of thousands of years before human beings came here. There have been ebbs and flows of predator-prey relationships. It's been a dynamic equilibrium that has changed for millennia and millennia. It's best that we just watch and observe. I had a great time talking to you. I hope you've learned something from Jamie and I, and please keep watching in your spare time, of course, on Safari Live, #Safari Live on Twitter. You can talk to us, ask us questions, even if we're not at school. You can watch us on YouTube, or you can watch us at wildsafarilive.com, which I think is the Nat Geo feed. Right, we're going to say goodbye to you now, and hopefully we'll talk to you again. Enjoy your school day. I'm glad I didn't have to start school as early as you did. Enjoy it, and we'll catch up with you later. Bye-bye.